our very first webinar, as I mentioned, around the lessons that we've learned over the last 8 years of impact-linked finance. We're really excited to share them with you today. We have released a report about this if you want to dive deeply into some of the lessons, but I also know that reading 54 pages takes some time. So we will be diving into some of our favorite lessons from the report in the session today. Now, before we dive into this, we're going to do a very quick introduction into impact-linked finance and why we got so excited about it in the first place all those years ago. All right, so Roots of Impact was founded based on a very simple question: what kind of finance do enterprises actually need to optimize for impact? Not just to grow, which is a very common question that's asked when we're talking about growing the impact space, but to grow in a way that focuses on maximizing their impact. Now, why is this particularly important? Because impact performance can vary significantly. Even in an impact space, impact is not guaranteed. Now, in this slide, you'll see one of my favorite graphics from the 60 Decibels Microfinance Index. If you don't know 60 Decibels, they conduct end customer surveys to provide on-the-ground outcome level data about how much impact a company is providing as reported by its customers. So they took over 1 million data points and turned it into an index, and they found that the difference between the top and the bottom performing microfinance institutions based on their customers' feedback was 400%. Now, 400% is huge. So if you ask the question, does microfinance create impact? The answer is, well, it depends. Some microfinance institutions create 400% more impact than others. Impact is just not guaranteed. And this is important because the financial instruments that we're using for the impact space, where we're interested in the double or the triple bottom line, are the same financial instruments that we've used for decades to maximize the single bottom line. So why don't we do something about this? Why don't we embed impact into impact finance? And that very simply is what impact-linked finance is. It's putting impact at the heart of each and every transaction. Now, impact-linked finance can be deployed using various instruments, but the heart of all of them is that incentives are provided based on the achievement of predefined positive outcomes. And we call this better terms for better impact. Basically, impact is at the heart of each and every transaction. So let's look at a live example to bring it to life. This is a transaction that we are currently working with in partnership with DFC. Now here, DFC provides an enterprise with a loan, and then when they improve their gender outcomes, we reduce the interest rate on the loan. So the better the gender outcomes, the less the enterprise pays in interest. Their gender outcomes are measured on an annual basis with an independent verifier, and the interest rate is adjusted accordingly depending on the outcomes that they produce. So better terms, a reducing interest rate; for better impact, improved gender outcomes. And while this whole concept might sound quite pioneering, in reality, the practice of impact-linked finance is growing substantially every year, with large funders allocating portions of their portfolios to deepen their impact additionality using impact-linked finance. We implemented our very first social impact incentive in partnership with SCC, the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation, in 2016. And this slide shows the transactions that we as Roots of Impact have worked on since then and the partners that we've implemented these with. And we're really excited to see the practice gaining traction beyond just us, with other players structuring impact-linked finance transactions and raising impact-linked finance-based funds. With that said, you now know why we are so excited about this topic, which means that we're just about ready to jump into our lessons. But before we do, we want to hear a little bit more about you in the room and share some of the perspectives that are in the room. So I am going to launch a poll, which you should be seeing at the moment. And this poll aims to get some insights into who's here, who the participants are. The first question is around which stakeholder group you best identify with, and your options there are investor or funder, intermediary or advisor, an enterprise support organization, an academic or a student, an entrepreneur or other. We're also interested to hear how much exposure you've had to impact-linked finance, whether you're totally new, whether you are exploring impact-linked finance, whether you've dabbled in impact-linked finance, you've dipped your toe in, you've tested it out, or whether you are an expert in impact-linked finance. And then lastly, and you can choose as many sectors or topics as you're interested in here, we'd love to hear which sectors or topics are most relevant for you in the work that you do and the interest areas that you have. We've got agriculture, climate, education, energy, gender, health, WASH, financial services, and other on the list. So we'll give it a couple of minutes. We've got 57% of everybody in the room has participated. So keep those votes coming in, and then we will share those so that we can all get a sense of everybody else. All right, and it looks like we have the majority of people have responded, so I'm going to share the results. Okay, so we've got a large number of intermediaries and advisors in the room, also some investors and funders and enterprise support organizations. That's great to see. Most people are exploring. That's lovely. A couple have dabbled. I'm very glad to hear that. My colleagues told me that dabbling was a very South African word, so I'm happy to hear that there are others who feel that they have dabbled. And a couple of experts too, so that's fantastic. We would love to open up the discussion during the Q&A session and hear your insights as well. And then in terms of topics and sectors, really nice diversification here. We've got a lot of financial services, some climate, some agriculture, some gender, but really a good split across all the impact themes that we are passionate about. So great to have you with us. I'm going to stop sharing that now, and we can dive back into the presentation. We're going to dive into the main event, which is our biggest lessons. And who better to help me with this than the man who started Roots of Impact himself all those years ago, Bjorn Struve, who is our founder and co-CEO. Bjorn, welcome. It's lovely to have you.
Yeah, nice to meet you all. I'm very much looking forward to share our insights from the last 8 years. Yeah, and let me directly dive in. So this is actually the report we are talking about. Like we picked the 8 highlights from this. As Natasha already shared, 50-something pages, very dense and very, let's say, very deep in terms of the lessons we share in this report. So my colleague will post the link of this report. It was very important for me after more than 8 years of practice, really, to summarize everything we learned. We made a bunch of mistakes. When we first started in Latin America in 2016, we had some basic ideas what we need to do. Today, I think we need much better. We know much better what really works and what doesn't. And I'm super happy to share all this with you together with Natasha today. So let's dive into the number 1 of 8. So we have 8 lessons to share with you. So I think the biggest and most important, it's not necessarily a lesson. It's I think we knew that, but we want to make it crystal clear that impact-linked finance should be always used in a way that it aligns fully with the strategy of the enterprise. So although from time to time we use instruments that are highly concessionary, it is not project finance, it's not grant, it's not a typical grant or so. So when we talk to enterprises about that are probably interested to receive support, applied for a call, or were selected in another way, then typically our first question is about what would you like to achieve and you can't you can't achieve this right now? Or how do you think about achieving this faster or in a different way? How can we support you? Where can we help? And this is actually the start of a conversation. When we then hear that the company would like to improve on the impact side, then we are really looking for ways to help them. And this is a bottom-up process. So looking into one example on the next slide, and we will have examples for most of our learnings here. My colleague will also post links if you have case studies about these, so that you can read a little bit about the background of these enterprises. So let me quickly tell you about K-Wash, which is a company that is dedicated to providing affordable and clean water in Cambodia to rural households. And we partnered with Aqua for All to provide them a social impact incentive. And this was all about helping them actually to achieve what they wanted to achieve, just faster and more consistently. So K-Wash is in the business of acquiring private water utilities, so in the piped water, and making them more efficient and expanding their pipes into more rural areas. So it's really about connecting additional households with water pipes and clean water. And however, this business is challenging because the last mile is the hardest, right? And it's the most expensive one. And so we could use our sink to actually help them to do exactly this. So concretely, the metrics were about increasing the connection in areas where they already were active. So encouraging and enabling them actually to connect more households to the existing pipes. And additionally to that, we were rewarding them for going into areas which are in particular challenging. So really going the last mile, last impact mile. And we had criteria for this areas, how to describe areas that are in particular underserved, where most households ID poor. This is a segmentation used in Cambodia for the poorest of the poor. And where is the need for water most relevant? Yeah, and K-Wash actually, we offered them social impact incentives, which is actually a cash incentive combined with an investment over years. And we offered them $350,000 in sink payments over 3 years, combined with an investment of $2 million. And they're on the way to implementing this and performing on these metrics.
Great, thanks, Björn. Our second lesson from the report is around the impact variance. And what we found is that the greater the impact variance, the more impact-linked finance is needed. Now, impact risk is a topic that is, in my opinion, somewhat neglected in the impact finance space and often widely underestimated. This is a lovely graph that lays out the impact that we expect and the point of investment, and then what happens beyond that. And we tend to assume that the impact at the point of investment will be the same or higher in the future. In reality, that's almost never the case. Enterprises may under or overperform on their impact, and this differential is called impact variance. Now, in the beginning, we spoke about the 400% variance in impact created by microfinance institutions. And in some sectors, like infrastructure, impact variance is really quite low. But in others, like healthcare or financial inclusion, it can be quite high. And where it's high, there is a strong case for rewarding positive impact to ensure that that is ultimately what ends up happening. Now, a great example of this is a transaction that we structured in India for finance for environmentally friendly e-rickshaws. Now, here we're specifically trying to incentivize better gender performance with this company. Now, this is a sector where we just don't have robust data on the effect of e-rickshaw finance for women over time. There is the potential here in providing finance to women for e-rickshaws that this could either substantially improve their livelihoods and autonomy over time or not. And the company that we're working with has great intentions and ambitions to support women. But because it's a sector with potential for impact variance, having impact linked finance working to support them in achieving these gender goals really makes sense to help optimize the impact that they have on their women clients and ensure that this impact is sustained over time.
So I take this one, our learning number 3 about the use cases. And we have nowadays 5 use cases. We started actually with 2. So when we conceptualized the first program in partnership with the SDC, we only thought about 2 cases, and nowadays we are talking about 5. And we will go through it step by step and present one example for each of these. So the first case is about unlocking impact potential. And this is typically a company that is intentional about impact, but commercially strong. So they would not need additional support. They wouldn't need subsidy to do their job. However, if you would provide them rewards in the form of financial incentives, they could push the boundary further. So they could actually unlock additional impact potential. And that's super exciting because it's super efficient also to do that. And one example, that was actually our very, very first transaction in 2016 in Mexico, is Clínicas del Azúcar. This is the fastest growing chain of clinics treating diabetes in Mexico. They are just opening clinic number 48 these days. And it's a one-stop shop. So they have really world-class treatment results, and they're focusing on the poor that are suffering from diabetes in Mexico. And you can imagine what big a problem this is in this country. And they are absolutely, they have a massively scaling business model. They make money. They are on a path to big scale and also profitability. And they didn't have an issue back in 2016 to find investors believing in their plans. But the question was, how far can they go when it comes to serving bottom of the pyramid customers? And we provided them incentives actually to do exactly that. So the metrics were structured around 2 things. In increasing the proportion of low-income customers, and at the same time, because this is really important in terms of quality and outcomes orientation, at the same time also keeping the very, very high quality of treatment at the same level. And this, you can find, there's a case study well described what we did and also what the results were. They outperformed on all metrics and is a major success story. Interestingly, they kept on impact track because when they have to decide what population to serve, they need to make a decision about where to locate a clinic, because the location of the clinic defines very much the patients it will serve. And they continue to deliver their services to poor Mexicans. Let's go to use case number 2. And this one is a case where we typically have an enterprise highly committed to deep impact, but not yet commercially viable so that they could easily find investors. So they really need to overcome the early, let's say, critical phase where they need to build up the critical mass, and where they also need to test product market fit, etc. And for these companies, it's all about investment readiness, right? Typically, this comes together with technical assistance, but also with rewards for their impact. So the rewards we are paying them can really make a difference to the investors, who then can calculate with this additional revenues and provide investment to these companies. A good example of this use case number 2, enabling sustainable impact, is Akista, which is also a company in the wash space. They actually developed from a manufacturer of hydro-powered pumps that serve smallholder farmers into a company delivering irrigation as a service. And for them, it's all about additional income and increasing income for smallholder farmers. And their metrics, what we incentivize them for, is all about income generation for smallholders. And with our SYNC support, also a SYNC social impact incentive, they were able to raise investment. And it's a very good example, actually, for this use case. And number 3, we have another one, and this came later then, as we learned from our transactions and from the potential that these companies provide. Here, it's all about a very specific impact goal. And the poster child of this is gender impact, right? So I think we are big fans of this approach to look always at, is there additional potential to unlock gender impact? Does the company has everything in place actually to deliver everything they are delivering already to women and men at the same time, or even make explicit women empowerment possible? If not, this is very often a very clear case that they could do better and faster. And what Natasha shared before with the e-rickshaw company is a very good example. So here it's all about one specific impact. It can be gender, it can also be climate, that is addressed from the onset. And the whole conversation is then about how can you improve gender outcomes in your business, for example. Example here is a business called Sprints that is active in vocational skills training. So they do train young talents in software development and coding and things like that. They are based in Egypt. And of course, this is all about placing people into jobs. And we also incentivize them to do exactly that. So the outcome that is rewarded here is really the job placement and the retention in these jobs. And women were massively underrepresented in this business, but there was a clear intention to do much better there. And so we structured our support completely around gender impact for them just recently. So then we have another use case, which is about, we don't call it mission drift, but it's easier to understand that way. So it's really about, if there is a risk that a well-performing company in terms of impact would drift away from this because of commercial pressure, because of certain circumstances that are also probably context related, then incentives and rewards can, of course, also help to keep the company on track. And one example here is a company from Ecuador. They are doing dental healthcare for the poor, fantastic model. I will go into this later when we also discuss another learning. But we help them actually to stay on track in the pandemic when everything closed down. As a dental health provider, you can imagine how challenging this was, and come back and continue serving the poor. Use case number 5 is, last but not least, a use case where it's all about new business lines. So there are companies we met that have ideas how they could actually improve their impact by adding an additional service or product or region, etc. And they do not only need rewards, actually, they also need the investment, actually, because this is typically so risky that no investor would actually provide them the upfront financing to implement this. And for that reason, we typically work with impact-linked loans or impact-linked revenue share agreements, providing the upfront capital together with impact rewards. And here, a good example for this is Pure Fresh, which is a water refilling company in Kenya. They are running 100 outlets where they fill water bottles with clean water. Quite a traditional business model, but they want to innovate, and they have big and great ideas in terms of how to reach more rural customers and how to go mobile. So at the moment they are in retail shops, etc. And in the future they want to go to the people where they are and build containers and also be cashless, so that the whole operation would be much more efficient and also go much more rural. And we are helping them actually. They could, with their own resources, they could only do a few of these sites, and we are helping them to do much more so that they have a reliable pilot to test whether this concept really works. And that was use case number 5. Here you see all together, and who knows what the future will bring. Maybe in 2 or 3 years we will have number 6 and number 7. I think it's just a good example how impact-linked finance can be used in very, very different circumstances. So I think I also provide a little bit of insights on our learning number 4. And this learning number 4 was all about when we only worked with a small set of instruments like social impact incentives, impact-linked loans, and also equity type of instruments, then we were actually excluding very, very early stage enterprises. And we were always thinking, hey, can't we use at least the principles of impact-linked finance also at this stage already? Because I think it's better to set the right incentives already in this stage, so that a company that has a big vision is really rewarded for achieving it, and gets the North Star actually baked in their financing. And so we came up with several models actually to focus on these companies. Impact-linked challenge funds, impact-linked matching funds, and they all are based on simplification, making it easier to design the structure and also to measure the impact. Sometimes these structures have just one golden impact indicator that needs to be reached in 3, 4, 5 years. This makes it very easy to structure and also to understand. And others, for example, the Impact Ready Matching Fund is a hybrid instrument where we combine actually capacity building for impact measurement with a matching fund. So that's exclusively designed to serve startups. And I have an example here from our program in Bangladesh that we run in partnership with the Swiss Embassy in Bangladesh and Lightcastle Partners, our local partner. And there, the Be Pretty program, in the Be Pretty program, we actually invented this model, which is now also used in our impact-linked fund for WASH that we run together with Aqua for All, and also in our impact-linked fund for gender-inclusive fintech, because it was actually proven that it works with a bunch of companies that you see here. This is just an excerpt. I think we have so far signed 11 agreements with startups in Bangladesh for impact-ready matching funds that actually reward them for building up an IMM system in different stages, but at the same time require them to raise seed finance. That's why it's called a matching fund.
And I'm on mute. There we go. Thanks, Bjorn. All right, lesson number 5. So we learned that sector and theme-specific funds enable comparability, learning, and efficient implementation. Now, the data and the lessons learned from doing multiple transactions within the same sphere has been really significant for us in developing appropriate pricing of incentives and defining what additionality means within that specific sector or impact theme. And this is a momentum that we're able to gather towards more efficient and effective structuring processes. And once we have sufficient data, then benchmarks can be created and leveraged to develop theme or sector specific frameworks, which ultimately help us structure transactions in a way that is faster, which is of course a benefit to the enterprise, and just more impactful. So this is an example of a blueprint for impact-linked finance facilities that brings together the LPs and the enterprises as usual, but adds on impact incentives and technical assistance. Now, we've done iterations of this in multiple different geographies and across different themes, and the combination of investment, technical assistance, and impact incentives is what I like to think of as the fund of the future, which really addresses all the needs of impact funders and enterprises by packaging everything necessary to achieve scale and impact for those enterprises. To facilitate these dedicated funds, we co-initiated the Impact-Linked Finance Fund, which is a vehicle that enables implementers like ourselves to manage or co-manage sector or theme-specific ILF funds. Having this vehicle means that we can pool funding from different sources towards the same impact goals, which is then obviously quite catalytic. The momentum around this is growing with funds that you can see on the slide, like geographic focus funds like the Impact Linked Fund for Eastern and Southern Africa, Be Pretty, which focuses specifically on Bangladesh, and thematic funds like ILF for Education, Gender Inclusive Fintech, and the WASH funds that we've launched in partnership with Aqua for All. It's nice to see Aqua for All in the room today. Thanks for joining us. And then there's 2 funds that we're launching shortly, focused on gender and clean energy and green growth. Some of these funds we manage ourselves and some in partnership with other impact-linked finance implementers, but we have absolutely found that bringing them together, kind of coming together under a common sector or theme, really helps us to be more efficient and effective in the way that we implement. All right, lesson 6, combining incentives and technical assistance is a winning formula. Now, when we started out with impact-linked finance, we didn't initially plan for technical assistance. We'd create these beautiful transaction structures with all these great incentives, and we'd sign the contract, and then we'd realize that actually it doesn't just need incentives to achieve these impact goals, they also need support. And once we started building the support into our processes, really cool things started happening. Some of the kinds of TA that we use to strengthen the capacity of enterprises includes developing a robust IMM system, because of course, if we're going to incentivize based on impact, we need to be able to track and measure the impact as it's created. We also support enterprises in reaching new target groups, like low-income clients, women, or other groups that would otherwise go underserved. And we support them in understanding their end customers and the impact that they're having on these customers. For example, by partnering with 60 Decibels to hear from their customers directly. One of my favorite transactions from the past few years is with a company called Trucker in Pakistan. So Trucker started as a logistics company facilitating the trucking industry, kind of like an Uber for trucking. Now, in Pakistan, many of the trucking companies are actually small businesses that are family run. So there's big potential for impact in supporting them to grow their businesses. And Trucker provides small amounts of data-backed finance to support, firstly, the trips of the trucks, and ultimately the trucks themselves for these small businesses. Now, when we first met Trucker, they were very clear that they wanted to deepen their gender impact. But as a male-founded company in the trucking sector in Pakistan, this really wasn't an easy task. But despite this, they were really committed to gender transformation, both within Trucker itself and within the sector they operate in as a whole. So we collaborated with Value for Women, who designed a beautifully comprehensive gender action plan and strategy for Trucker. Now, not only was this a significant value add to Trucker, but it also provided us with a solid basis and a baseline to structure the incentives, ensuring that we were doing so in a way that was safe and empowering for the women in the trucking value chain. And now, as Trucker begins its gender transformative process, we're confident that it has the tools to create systemic change, and that we're aligning the financial incentives with the metrics that have the highest additionality possible. This, for us, was a beautiful case of how technical assistance and incentives work hand in hand. And as Value for Women actually pointed out to us, it was also really interesting to see how powerful incentives are on top of any gender action plan to ensure that there's that long-term impact created.
Yeah, I take this one. Also one of my favorites. We designed the design principles, or we defined the design principles for impact-linked finance back in 2019, when we published a report in partnership with the Boston Consulting Group, actually defining the whole concept of impact-linked finance and providing all the definitions that are necessary. And in this report, we also highlighted the first time this 9 design principles. And just to pick 2 or 3 and describe it, one of the key principles is ensure impact additionality, for example. So we provide rewards for everything beyond and above from what would happen anyway. That's clear. We are working with businesses, and everything we do is actually trying to encourage and enable them to do better on impact. And that's a basic principle, that we look at additionality. And at the same time, we also try to focus, there's another principle, on outcomes and not on outputs. That's a challenging one. And we are not always able to actually implement it that way. And interesting information also about these principles is it's actually impossible to optimize all of them together. Think about simplicity. There's a principle about making it as simple as possible, and at the same time focus on outcomes. This may not fit together. However, the whole idea of this principle is really trying to optimize this in a way that the transaction at the end is trying to push the boundaries in all of these 9 dimensions and find the right balance and the sweet spot. And our learning here is, hey, we defined it 5 years ago, and there's no single principle we would now redefine. We are strong believers that these principles will lead to higher quality and better effectiveness. So if you follow these principles, and it's really kind of a checklist, then the results will just be better. In particular, the results you will see over the course of the transaction, right? In 3, 4, 5 years, then you will see the impact it will create. And on the next slide, I just want to highlight how we are going to help other ILF practitioners to implement this in practice. So we are right now working on a so-called self-assessment tool for ILF effectiveness. And this will actually be based on these 9 principles. And for each of these principles, there will be easy to answer questions. And it's really a question of, after you structure the transaction, go through the questions 10 minutes, and then you will have a score. And if the score is too low, then you should just rethink how you structured it. And of course, the questions will also guide you very concretely and where's potential for improvement. This will be an open source, publicly available tool that we will offer for anyone in the market. So, and now quickly on the last lesson, and then we will also give you a little bit of a future outlook, and then we hopefully have a great discussion. The last learning was all about adaptation. So it didn't need a pandemic to teach us that everything we do need to be adaptive. In particular, when we talk about very concrete targets to be achieved, and when we define very concrete metrics. However, the pandemic, of course, was a kind of a turbo in that respect, that we realized, oh, there are probably more than one transaction we need to adapt right now. And however, what is really important, also recognizing that companies, in particular the innovators, are constantly changing. And they're constantly changing to achieve better results. And we are interested in these results, right? So we should be supportive, helping them also on their way to find the right way actually to deliver highly efficiently for their customers, but also the impact we want to see. And for that reason, nowadays, it's a standard clause in all of our contracts that we can always renegotiate the metrics and the targets. Then we can even completely change a transaction if this is advisable. Which actually also points out we are entering into a long-term relationship with the entrepreneurs, right? Like the investors. We are on their side, and we can restructure the transaction if necessary. And on the next slide, I brought you back Novolis that I already mentioned and the use cases, because Novolis was not only a good example for this use case, keeping a company on track, it is also a very good example for this learning that we really need to be open to adaptation. Because in the pandemic, we actually, of course, had to adjust this because this is high risk. This was a high risk undertaking in the pandemic. So Novolis actually adapted quickly and completely changed their business model and continued to do their work. And this was really fantastic to see. And we couldn't be as ambitious in terms of, oh, you have to reach out to more poor people and go deeper and further. No, we actually had to to discuss with them a plan how to keep the whole operation alive and then go back to the poor. And this is exactly what we did. And there's a nice article you can read about this in Impact Alpha. That is kind of a case study, what we did with our support.
Thanks so much, Björn. That brings us to the end of our 8 lessons from 8 years of impact-linked finance, looking into our past as roots of impact. And before we dive into the discussion, and if you do have any questions, please feel free to drop them into the chat in the meantime. I want to quickly talk about what the future looks like, building on these lessons from the past 8 years. So as impact-linked finance has been gaining traction and interest, we've realized that there's so much more that we can do with the lessons and the tools and the templates and the processes around impact-linked finance that we have refined over the last 8 years. We really want to see our impact as roots of impact scale. And as a relatively small team, there's only so much impact-linked finance that we can physically do ourselves. But if we could find a way to systematize what we've learned and make it available to others, then we could really see major impact additionality. And that is super exciting for us. So that's what we've been working on with support from SDC, the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation. And full disclosure, we're not quite there yet. This is still a sneak preview. But what we're building is a platform that will bring together people who are as passionate about impact-linked finance as we are. We'll have trainings on impact-linked finance, both live trainings and a self-paced course. We'll have tutorials. We'll have an end-to-end transaction hub that will walk you through the process of doing an impact-linked finance transaction, including the tools and templates that we refined over the years. We'll have more case studies. Ahmed, you asked about the case study for sprints. We will have more case studies. We'll have things like the resources that Christina has been dropping into the chat throughout this session, and a whole lot more as well. And of course, if you need specific guidance or support as you build your own impact-linked finance practice, we'll be available for that too. So in the chat, you can find a link to our website, which includes some more details about what to expect with our community hub launching in January 2025 and the transaction hub following after that. You can also express an interest in some of our trainings now. As I mentioned, we've got a self-paced impact-linked finance course, a basic live course, and we will have an advanced course as well, so that no matter what your starting point is, there's the opportunity to deepen your understanding of impact-linked finance. So as Christina has put the link in the chat there, you're welcome to dive into that. And we're also very happy to share some more insights around that. We are very excited about this after all these years of doing this ourselves, to be working with you to bring this to life. So last thing, how do you get involved? If this does sound interesting, check out the link in the chat and feel free to reach out for more information. And in the meantime, we would love to hear what you are looking for. Like I said, this platform is still in the process of being built, and we want to make sure that when it goes live, it does everything that you want it to do and more. So if you're able to, please take a moment to tell us a little bit about your interests and needs when it comes to impact-linked finance, so that we can keep you in mind as we put the final bows and whistles on this offering. You can either scan the QR code here with your phone or click on the link in the chat, fill it out later. And thank you in advance. We really appreciate your inputs to help us create tools that will best meet your needs and your passion areas. I'll leave that up there for a couple of moments, but the link is also in the chat to our Typeform survey, where you can tell us a little bit more about what would be most beneficial for you in that process. And with that, it is time for a discussion. So we will open the floor. Please feel free to ask your questions directly or post them in the chat, whichever you're more comfortable with. You are welcome to unmute and turn on your camera, and let's have a discussion. Christina, I am going to introduce our amazing head of community and communications, who's been doing all the magical work you've been seeing in the chat in the background. Do we have any initial questions to get us started, or shall we go straight to the live?
Straight to the line. I think people want to speak up, I guess. So please raise your hand. Yeah, Ahmed, please go. You're the first.
Hello, guys. Thank you so much for the amazing session. I've been following your work for quite some time now, and I'm very, very impressed with the focus on impact measurement and management. It's something that is very needed in the impact finance and the social finance sector, and most social entrepreneurs fail to actually capitalize on that. But my question, I actually have two questions. The first one is, I remember seeing one of your sessions before, like online, and someone asked about your involvement in education, to which you guys answered that it's not one of your focuses at the moment, but now I can see that the impact linked fund is focused. There's a part that is focused on education. So I wanted to know what changed and how did you guys get there? The second one about Sprinter, the Egyptian company, which I think also is like maybe the first company in the Swana region, like the Southwest Asia and North Africa. So I'd like to know if you guys are shifting your focus to focus on this area a bit more from which I come. And that's it. Thank you.
Yeah,
thanks so much,
wonderful.
Ahmed.
Thanks. I think I can answer this question. Thanks for asking. You're right. Actually, we are now in education, but in particular because of a new fund. You have probably seen there is an impact-linked fund for education that is implemented by iGravity, our partner, together with us. So we implement it together. And it's funded by the Jacobs Foundation in Switzerland and also the Swiss Development Corporation. Interestingly, the Sprints transaction is also part of this. So the fund has two objectives. One is K-12 education in mainly in Africa, and the other is vocational skills development. And we are right now in discussion with the funders and potential additional partners whether we can even expand the scope to other regions. Yeah, so can tell you more in probably 6-8 weeks or so. Most of because impact linked finance is focusing on businesses, right? And education is not necessarily full of businesses, right? And we don't want to finance private schools. It's rather, the basic idea is rather really finding enterprises that are enhancing the quality of education, edtech, and similar. We did a lot of transactions, exciting transactions, not yet case studies out, but we will also publish case studies on this sector, which is of course much more challenging to make a transaction than, for example, in off-grid energy. So I also learned there is a big difference in terms of complexity when it comes to topics like education.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, because I mean, I worked for an edtech startup in Egypt for almost 2 years, and this sector is really booming in the Arab world in general. But also, my PhD is focused on vocational education as well. So that's why it seems really interesting. And I'd like to be updated on this front. Thank you so much.
So if you have companies to recommend in this space, give us a hint.
Yeah, sure.
And
sure. I can
just to quickly mention, so of course we are fund managers on the one side, and we are also practitioners helping other practitioners on the other side. But unfortunately, we are not in a position to select our topics by ourselves. We always need a funder that would agree to it. So otherwise, we would probably do a lot of things, also a bit differently probably than we do today.
Yeah, maybe the next one, I see there's a lot of hands up. Maybe Philly, you go next. I think you were the ones directly after that who raised your hand.
Thanks so much, Christina. So I have 4 questions, so maybe I'll do 2 and then move on and share some airtime with people. I'm not sure what's the best approach to that, because I don't want to get too greedy here. So I was kind of writing these questions as listening to all of the findings and as these popped into my mind. So I am reading a little bit so I don't lose the train of thought. But the first one, obviously, what I was thinking about when you were talking about just the proof of concept and their different views on when you should start, and it's never too early to start and all of that. But how long do you think is recommended for a fair or accurate proof of concept? Because now in what I've seen is so often we'll start a project which is phenomenal and so exciting, but it's after a year, it's now what's next, and there's not enough time spent like actually making sure that everything in the initial phase is right and the metrics are right there to progress and to make sure that the progression again follows the right plan. So that's kind of question 1. And then I'll go for question 2 and I'll hand it over and we can come back. The other one was about gender impact. So leading into unlocking additional impact potential, and reading up about how, you know, gender was one of them that you found out about. That seems to come up quite a lot. There's evidence that gender, the SDG 5, is the one gender that kind of transcends all the other SDGs in making sure that we solve them, having an underlying element of gender equality or gender impact. Is this something now that you actively look for or try and find when working with new enterprises or entrepreneurs due to this finding? From that sense, and does that kind of excite you for other ones that you might find and look for? So let me pause with those 2 and we can come back to the others.
So let me quickly take the first one and then Natasha can go to the second. I would love also to talk about gender, but we are also balanced in our way of managing this. So when it comes to this very early stage companies and proof of concept, normally, we only work with companies that are highly intentional about their mission, right? And if a company, irrespectively how young they are, comes with a pitch and says, we want to bring 5,000 vulnerable youth into jobs, then we know about the outcome they want to achieve already, right? And then it's rather a question of, okay, how to get there. So what is the right concept, the right business model, how to iterate products and services, and the market, etc. But the North Star will hopefully not change. If the North Star would change, then it would not be a good choice for ourselves, right? And having said that, I don't like challenge funds for that reason, because a challenge fund, there's a jury, and the one who pitches best and who has the best impression on the jury gets some money, and then they start, right? And I would like to see it more that, yeah, you can provide funding up front, and then we come to this concept of an impact-linked challenge fund. But if you come closer to your golden impact target, the 5,000 people, youth into jobs, then you should earn additional funding for this, like rewards. And so you can bring actually this together. You don't necessarily need to have a proof of concept already, but you can already have the rewards in place. It's a bit like the X prize, right? So the X prize is a big carrot and there's a big competition around it. We don't have competition yet in our programs, but it's the same logic. And proof of concept is necessary actually to deliver impact efficiently, right? And also to be commercially viable at the end of the day. And what the point in our report is, we need to consider this in our design. So we cannot design structure for a company that is in the middle of let's say, validating their business model with a social impact incentive that would measure every year target achievement to quite narrowly defined metrics. So it would be rather one big golden impact KPI, maybe in stages and sliding scale, of course, never all or nothing, and things like that. And over to Tash about our perspective on gender.
Yeah, thanks, Billy, for the great question. It's so interesting that you asked this, because about a year ago, we did an analysis of all of the transactions that we'd done and all the companies that we worked with. We looked at the metrics, we looked at the types of companies, we looked at the impact that they were trying to create, and we realized that the vast majority of our transactions had a focus, either through the company or through the metrics, on gender. And that was completely unintentional. It wasn't even a sort of intentional strategy that we were no, it was more than 2 years ago, because then we realized, hang on, why does this have so much impact? And we launched our first gender fund, and now it is very much an intentional strategy, because the potential for impact is huge. The spillover effects, the externalities are massive. And there really isn't a trade-off between supporting women and having a positive business case. It totally makes sense in all dimensions for us to support companies to do that. And we always, in every transaction we do, we think about the kind of exit sustainability. What happens when the incentives stop? When we are supporting an enterprise to focus on deepening their gender impact, if we do that in a way that helps them set up the systems and the processes to make that happen, if we do it correctly, once the incentives stop, that will continue to happen, and the impact will just continue to grow over time, even without the need of incentives. So very much so, it is absolutely an intentional area that we're focusing on.
Awesome, thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks everyone for these great questions. I think now handing over to Macarena, who's also been raising the hand for a long time. So I think now it's your turn.
Thank you very much. And thank you for opening up this space. It has been great. I am curious to know if you have ever been in a situation where the organization you've invested in is not as committed to impact as you would have thought so or expected to. Like, for example, if they're not willing to make some important trade-offs in favor of deepening or amplifying the impact that they have, or you generally sense it. If this has been the case, what have you done? Or if not, I guess what I'd like to know is if you believe that the impact-linked finance has a profound impact on the organizational culture and its leadership as well, and is if it could be a way of engaging the team and the leadership of an organization into that commitment that will deliver the expected results that we are pursuing, right?
That's a good one. Shall I start?
Yeah, you feel free to start.
I can remember many situations, and I can't give you names for obvious reasons, where we actually stopped the conversation because we didn't feel there's a sufficient commitment. So it's part of the selection process of companies that we try to understand, is this really intentional, or is it just because of the rewards? However, I also have seen cases, look, there's always some intention. The question is how much and who has the intention. And we don't want to bet only on one individual. So they will probably leave the company anyway, sooner or later. So, however, like every company has a certain culture, as you rightly say, right? And this culture needs to support a direction towards impact. Otherwise, Natasha also shared this principle of we need to know about our exit. So if they just do it for the money, they will go back to square one on the day when financial incentives run out. And we have seen a lot of great examples where also founders and management teams were actually able to get investors on board on a much more concrete impact mission. So look, a lot of entrepreneurs shy away in pitching their mission too concretely because they think, oh, the investor may think I'm in love with my customers, but we need to make business, etc., right? And I know a lot of situations, and in some of them, in some conversations, we were also involved, where they talked very, very concretely about their impact mission and also what they concretely want to achieve in terms of impact, and not so fuzzy in terms of, oh yeah, we want to create some jobs. And this was really healthy. But in short, it's a selection topic, and there is a very rigorous selection process where we also check intentionality.
Yeah, I totally agree. Our biggest predictor of whether a transaction is going to be successful or not is the commitment by senior management to the impact that we're all trying to create. Having said that, there are a lot of things that we can do to be smart in the way that we design a transaction. So small things like if we want them to reach a certain target group, not just having it be a number, making it a number and a proportion of their clients. So kind of minimizing the options for misalignment or any, not cheating, but kind of gaming the incentive system. But we do also find that sometimes just having incentives in place helps mobilize and align the teams internally. It won't always be that everyone in the organization will feel as committed to impact as some will. And there will be some who are intrinsically impact motivated, and then some who the impact incentives really help drive the alignment internally as well.
Great, very insightful. Thank you very much for sharing that with us.
Thanks so much. I think now it's over to Olivia, who's been raising the hand for forever. So I think now, thanks so much for your patience.
Thank you. It's lovely to hear this from you, and I've been involved in a transaction that we started recently. So I know the shift that this can bring in the intentionality of impact. And we're also working on how we can adapt it across all our transactions in the portfolio. So very inspired by the work. I wanted to ask you, one of the questions that we've been really reflecting very hard on is how do we really measure the additionality? Because that's a hypothetical situation. And once we do that in some scientific or artistic manner, how do we then price it? Because again, that can be debatable.
So additionality is probably one of the most challenging topics when it comes to designing a transaction. We do simulations, and the simulation, the more data are available, the better the simulations can be. Of course, this does not incorporate external changes that may come without, if, for example, if a government introduces a certain kind of tax, right? And we had this situation on fuels, then the cook stove companies in the country may probably have a very different baseline and additionality than before, because they are directly affected by it. But in general, simulation helps a lot, because simulation is also a piece where you can have a negotiation and a conversation around, right? And of course, we start with a financial plan, and the financial plan is typically already in place before we have the conversation. and the impact projections typically not as granular as the financial plan. And then when it comes to pricing, then it's all about trying to understand what does it actually cost to create this additional impact. In many cases, it doesn't cost a lot. It's more about focus and intention. And this is in particular the case when we talk about, for example, better serving women. In other instances, it does cost. For example, think of my example with K-Wash, the last mile delivery of piped water. This comes at a cost, but this you can quite good calculate. Like this is easy to calculate. And then we have actually calculation models. We call it the impact economic calculator to get it to the point where we have a pricing for the impact. And all of these nice tools you can find on our platform we are building, because the platform is actually meant to help you exactly in these nitty-gritty details of the transaction and make it as easy as possible. It will probably still not be easy, but easier than without any tools.
Not a lot to add, except that, Olivia, I love how you said the mixture of art and science, because that is exactly what it is. It's a little bit of art and a little bit of science, and we have tried to science-ify it as much as possible over the last 8 years, building the tools for this. But I think there's still a little bit of art and heart that goes into that as well.
Yeah. Also, while ensuring that we are not spending too much time and resources on measurement as opposed to program, and that's where the fine balance actually comes in. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for all of your great questions. We actually also have 2 great questions from Caleb. Caleb, do you want to ask them directly, or should I read them for you? Okay. So I'm reading them. Do you foresee, if any, shifts and trends that will shape the future of ILF in the next decade? That's a great one. And connected with that, building on the 8-year lessons across sectors, which one has demonstrated the greatest potential for ILF?
Oh, nice questions, Caleb. I'll start with the one about the shifts and trends that will shape the future of ILF in the next decade. Plenty, but I think my favorite one, and the one that I'm most enthusiastic about, is one that I mentioned in the presentation as well. What I'm coining the fund of the future, which is that every impact funds already have investment in TA. Very simple tweak on that is that every impact fund will have investment, TA, and impact incentives built into the design of the fund up front. And I think that small shift would have an immense shift in the amount of impact that we're able to create. So that would be my top one, but there are many more. I'll hand over to Bjorn.
Yeah, there's a reason why we run this company together, because we are so aligned. I would have mentioned exactly the same. But on top of that, the result of this will be there won't be so many funds that are not able actually to demonstrate their real impact, because that's at the moment the case, right? So you have no idea. There is an investment thesis and there is a bunch of portfolio companies and glossy impact reports, but not really concrete hard facts on impact achieved, and also not at all on additionality. And this will change when impact funds by default embed impact rewards. And that will be probably in 10 years. What was the second question again?
About the sector with the greatest potential for ILF, according to our experience. And thanks, Caleb, for mentioning it.
Well, the question is how to define biggest potential. So there are sectors where ILF is easier to apply. And this is whenever data is available. Everything tech, business to customer, where, for example, fintech, agri-tech, etc., where the companies are delivering services directly to the end customer, is super to like super starting position to design impact-linked finance transactions. Or in the healthcare sector, healthcare is a data business, right? So you have a diagnosis, then you have a treatment, then you have to check it, etc. And if you also collect the data in a proper way, then it's perfectly suited to design rewards around it and just to improve. And there are other sectors that are super data slim, but ILF would make a big difference and can make a big difference. Think about water and sanitation. That's not data heavy, right? So you don't track the sanitation sector in a way how you would track financial transactions in fintech or so. So it's really hard to say, because it's definitely a trade-off between what is possible and what would need to be done. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And kind of what's the easiest? What's the lowest hanging fruit? And where we've got data is definitely the lowest hanging fruit. I think the other thing that comes out of the lessons, which is definitely something we've seen, is the bigger impact variance sectors with bigger impact variance, definitely more potential for impact-linked finance. At the same time, I also believe that every company, regardless of its sector, is having an impact, and every company can have a better impact. And so while it really makes sense to cluster around impact themes and sectors, I think we need funds across different sectors because there's impact to be had everywhere.
Thanks so much. I love all the hands up, and I think for reasons of diversity now, handing over to you, Dave, because you haven't had a chance yet. Do you want to speak up and open your video?
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you, Natasha and Bjorn. Just as a way of context, I work in the international development space, focused a lot on access to finance, a lot of complementary programming with agriculture development, education, and health. And so I'm really interested in how to use impact-linked finance. And my question is, how do you envision impact-linked in finance alongside development work more broadly? Is it complementary? Is it competitive? The way I am thinking about it, I see some companies who have a social mindset. They also know there's a lot of donors out there, whether they're governments, whether they're foundations who give grants for social impact. So they would be saying, oh, well, why should I do impact-linked finance when I can search out some grant money instead? So I'm just wondering how to rationalize those two together.
Nice to meet you again, Dave.
Yes, nice to meet you again.
Let me start. So just with an example, we did a transaction in Honduras, and there we provided incentives to a company that brought first-time energy access to very rural communities. Solar-powered mills, like productive use energy and things like that. And they tried to make a business out of this, like a self-sustaining business. And of course, they didn't have critical mass. They needed a long time to build it. And then there was a big donor flooding the region with, they gave away all this equipment for free. And the business was over. And I'm far away from being radical in terms of the market will solve it. The other way around, like I think the market is completely broken, but I think we need to find a middle way between these two extremes. And I think international development and business need to converge, and we need to find ways to do this better. And a simple answer is probably when we talk about sectors and topics that are typically in the NGO development domain, it would need more incentives and more funding than, let's say, rewarding a fintech to be more gender inclusive. And then the question is, do the funders understand everything they need to know about this to make the right decisions? But in general, I think there is a big deal about private sector involvement in development, and impact-linked finance can definitely be a powerful tool to enable that, because otherwise the private sector will just shy away from all this.
Yeah, I think, I mean, impact-linked finance is not a silver bullet. It doesn't fix everything. But so, you know, where we don't play is the areas that are, what we say is we work with market-based organizations, and those are usually for-profits, but otherwise not-for-profits that have a solid revenue stream. We tend to work, I find the space that we work very interesting, because very often we're working with market-based entrepreneurs on the one side and development agencies on the other side that are used to funding humanitarian aid. And I think sometimes those two sectors of the world use very different terminology and jargon, and kind of bringing them together is a little bit of an art. But when it's done right, and when we're able to bring those two together, really cool things can happen. So I think there's a lot of potential there, providing it's done in the right areas and in the right way.
Yeah, thank you very much. I agree, and I'm hopeful as well, particularly around the areas like sync. I was thinking that would be a good application where you get some really social-minded, you know, grant funding that you could move in that direction towards a sync instead of just giving grants away. You know, so I think there's a lot of great potential there that I'm looking forward to exploring. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much. I think, Ahmed, you still have something burning on your mind, so please feel free to go next.
I think Philly was before me.
Please go for it. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, okay, thanks. Okay. So two more things. Bjorn hinted at the fact that you guys are managing the company together as co-CEOs, and I was really intrigued to understand how is this working, because I mean, for example, in Egypt we have this saying that says a ship with two captains often fails, or like sinks. So it's really interesting to see this kind of dynamic, and it seems like you guys get along really well. But how is it possible to manage a company together as two CEOs with being two different people with two different personalities? Obviously, clashes come up and different ideas come up sometimes. The second one is that I know that you guys recently raised a new investment round in July with the idea in mind to grow the pie of the impact-linked finance field in general. So how is it trickling down on the social finance scene in general? Like, are you seeing more fund manager adapting the impact-linked finance since you guys pioneered it and so on, or is it not yet catching up? Thank you.
Oh, very interesting questions. So on the co-CEO role, I think I did run the company since last year, October, by myself as the CEO. And I think if you look a bit deeper into our team, you will see a lot of diversity. And that's a major strength we have, like so many different perspectives. And sometimes we debate a lot about what is best and what to do and not, etc. And I think the same has to be true for the top management. And you can also think about it like this. This was just also necessary because there's so much to do and so much potential that I will focus more on, let's say, the future and the strategy and field building. And Natasha is actually caring about the now and the business right now and the programs and the team, so that we have a very good balance in terms of who is caring about what And yeah, and the rest is alignment and trust, right? And Tash, you may want to comment on that.
Yeah, I'll jump in on that. I think it's a beautiful question, Ahmed. I think you're absolutely right. We are two different people with two different perspectives, two different strength sets, and I think that is what makes it work. We have different areas where we excel at, and we utilize the best of both of us to kind of steer the ship in the right direction. And I think what is fundamental is that our vision is the same, and so on that we don't differ. When it comes down to the concrete vision of where we want to go, we're very much aligned, and then we get to debate on the smaller issues.
And I also appreciate the question on our investment round, because it was the first ever after 8-9 years, which actually means something. So we managed to build the company in a bootstrapped way. We were self-sustaining, and we didn't need to raise investment, but there was a certain impatience, right? So if you see this opportunity and if you have a vision, and we would also self-identify as a kind of an impact-focused enterprise, then you want to do it faster and more, and you want to get others on board. And yes, we see the potential. We are a business, and we need to pay back the investment at some point. Interestingly, by the way, we raised impact-linked finance, of course. So we are also rewarded for our impact, and this impact is field building related. So it's all about how effectively we are able to build the ILF area. And yeah, for me personally, it was just like, hey, now it's time to double down. Like, we know it's proven, we know it works. There are others who want to do it. There are many, many more who should do it and can do it. And yeah, now we took a bet, and there are some very well-aligned investors who were supporting us on that. That's just great. And by the way, they self-selected. We are a quite strange animal, right? So not a typical investment case for any mainstream impact investor. So we found very, very aligned investors supporting us.
Thank you so much for the question, Ahmed. I know that we promised you a 90-minute webinar, and we are at 91 minutes. And so I want to be mindful of everybody's time, but please let's connect bilaterally so we can answer the rest of your questions. But thank you so much to everybody for joining today. It was so lovely to have the opportunity to engage with you. Thank you for the really insightful questions. It's always fun to make this a discussion, and very much appreciate the engagement. This is the first in a series, so we will have more of these. Stay tuned to our LinkedIn. We'll be letting you know about the upcoming ones. We're really looking forward to building this community, and very much appreciate you being part of that journey with us. So thanks so much to everybody for joining us today, and we will see you soon.